welcome to the November Power BI updates. We just got these updates a couple of days ago because there was Thanksgiving in the US. So we finally got them and we are here to share with our team members Artiom and Kane from our team. We'll jump in with Artiom, who's going to share a feature related to small multiples.
Yeah, thank you, Asa. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk about this feature called Unshared and Unsynchronized Access for Small Multiples chart, which Microsoft presented very well in their monthly release video, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper and talk about some potential issues and risks related to that and possible solutions. So I will start from a very basic scenario. So here we have a sales amount by month year, a basic line chart, and I'm going to use small multiples to break it down by country. So I will bring in my country to small multiples, and as a result, I see these small charts for each country showing my sales amount. But the challenge that Microsoft fixed in this new release is related to this. You see, for many countries, we see just flat lines. And the reason for that is if I switch on my y-axis, we will see that all the countries, all the lines for all countries displayed within this range, starting from 0 to 150 millions. Why it's happening? Because one country, in this particular example, United States, has its values in the range between something and 150 millions. So the y-axis is adjusted to display that range, but that range doesn't work for all countries. And although other countries have fluctuations, we still see flat lines. So Microsoft new feature basically solves that. And to do that, we need to go to our axis settings, switch off shared y-axis, and after that, we will see individual y-axis for each small chart. And after that, we can use this scale to fit, which will basically unsynchronize all y-axis, showing different ranges for each individual country, scaled to each country's maximum and minimum, which is great. But there is a potential issue with that. In case we have many data points, we may not be able to display these, for example, data labels, right? So if I have data labels for many data points, it will be messy. And even now, it's not really nice to read. But if I switch off my data labels, I will not have indications of the numbers displayed. And only if I pay attention to my axis, I will see that these numbers are within this range. So that leads us to the risk that users may make incorrect conclusions just looking at the graphical interpretation. So like, for example, in some scenarios, we may not even have our y-axis displayed like this. And when we look at the chart, we will see that, for example, United Kingdom sales or Turkmenistan sales look better than United States. But in reality, they are 100 times less than United States. So this kind of potentially a risky situation when we just have this graphical information. We see fluctuations, but we don't see ranges or absolute numbers. So I thought, okay, how we can solve that? So first thing, I just want to switch to one column so that we have all countries one under another. All right, so as I said, yes, one option, data label, it may not work if we have many data points. Another option is to have y-axis, but users sometimes don't pay attention to y-axis and they may make incorrect conclusions. I thought maybe we can show somehow what's the minimum and maximum for each country and display that very clearly, communicate it very clearly. I remembered about just these maximum minimum lines, and I thought, oh, okay, that could be the solution. We can draw max and min lines, and we will add labels for that, and users will know the range of values for each country. I thought that should work, but it didn't. So when I add maximum line, see what happens. I see all my y-axis again, scaled from 0 to 150, and my maximum line is much higher than the lines of each individual countries in most cases. It turns out that maximum and minimum line, when you use it in small multiples, they don't show you actually maximum and minimums for each country. They do that for all countries. Like in this example, you see the maximum of United States is displayed for each country, and that defeats the purpose of scaling individual y-axis to fit individual countries. So that's not a solution, and I consider that a bug or something that Microsoft should definitely look into and fix. But again, coming back to our problem, okay, it doesn't work. What can we do? And I came up with a kind of 3-steps solution, which is a bit more complicated, but at least I achieved my goal. So what I did, I wrote measures to draw my maximum and minimum lines. And here are my measures, actually, so I can show them here, not going into details. This is for maximum, this is for minimum. And if I use these measures in small multiples, I can basically draw my lines like this. I will just slightly change the format so we see that in a different way. So I will make them dotted for maximum and minimum, and I definitely going to switch off markers for my maximum and minimum lines. So that was a step 1. Step 2 was to show labels, and now I used some custom formatting for my labels for these measures, so they show max and min in the label itself. I will not talk about this. We had another video about custom formatting, so you can find it and see how you can do that. But anyway, so this is what I have for labels. But when I switch on my labels, it will show me labels for all data points for max and min, which is not nice, of course, and I need to solve that somehow too. So, and that was the 3rd step. And to solve that, I used another measure to use transparent colors for data points where we don't reach maximum or minimum. So basically, I will display these labels in green color only for data points where we have maximum or minimum in our main measure. So for maximum line, I will use conditional formatting based on one measure, this one. And for my minimum line, the second one. And I will just make them slightly larger. And that actually gave me the result I was satisfied with. Well, right now I see the range explicitly telling me that these countries' values are between this minimum and this maximum, and that gives an idea. Even if I switch off my y-axis, users will know that these values are between these two minimum and maximum values, which is much better and much safer when we use this scale to fit for small multiples. There are different scenarios, and in different scenarios, you may need to think about other ways of solving that. But just to summarize, so this feature is absolutely brilliant and good and necessary, but we need to think about communicating to users what range is used for each small multiple chart so that they don't make incorrect or wrong conclusions about data based on just graphical information. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Artiom. That was some great problem solving, I think, for this feature. Kane, over to you. Do you want to let the audience know what you're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So yeah, thanks, Artiom. That was a really great solution, I have to say. Hard act to follow. I'm going to be talking about the creating dynamic slices with field parameters feature. So I'll share my screen. This is the feature which I'm going to be looking at, and it's easier to explain by showing So how does this field parameters dynamic slicer work? Well, I'll create a slicer, and I'm going to add a field parameter that has just a whole bunch of different columns from my model. We can duplicate that slicer, and then I'm going to select continent, and then when we select our second slicer in the options for the field parameter here in this drop down in the field well, you can choose show values of selected field. You can see now we have continent selected, and it shows us, we have continent selected, and it shows us the different continents. And so what this means is we've created a slicer that's dynamic for the values within the field parameter. So as I click through and choose different field parameters, we get the different slices. Previously, what you would have needed to do was, if you had a field parameter, say with these 3 items, city, continent, country in it, you would have had to have put 3 different slices on your page for each one. There was no way to make it, well, it wasn't easy to make it dynamic like this. So now we can have a field parameter in one slicer, and it's dynamic, and it changes according to which field parameter we've selected. So here's the same thing that I've implemented, but with a chart with the which has the field parameter as the axis here. So you can see it has my all columns field parameter as the axis, and I've set it up just exactly how I showed you, where I've got 2 field parameters, and the second one I selected here to be show all the fields. So it works, it's great. We can choose continent, and I can choose a selection of continents. We can choose country region. I can choose a selection of countries. All good. There are a few things you need to be aware of though. So one thing that is nice is I can choose country, and then I can shift and also choose continent, and it creates a hierarchy slicer for me. And you also get a hierarchy in the chart here. So if I drill down, you can see we can drill down to through the hierarchy, and within each country we've got continent, which isn't ideal. You'd probably do it the other way around. So I'll choose continent and I'll choose country region, and then we could drill into Asia and see the countries within that continent. So that's great. The problem is though, what happens if you, this works because there's a relationship between country and continent, but what happens if we decided that we wanted to select city and category? Well, you can't. So you need to be careful. You can see that it's not supported because there's no relationships, and what we end up, there's no relationship between these 2 columns in our model. And what we end up with is the first one that we've selected in the chart, and we get this error message displayed, which is not a particularly good user experience if you've built a report. So that's my first tip, is we need to be careful with how we set up slices. Another thing you'll notice too is that if I take all my selections off, I get the same error message. So while it's nice that you can select 2 field parameters in your hierarchy, and that'll introduce a hierarchy in the chart and in your second slicer with the values, you need to be careful to set your slices to be, if they don't have fields that are related in the model, then I would suggest you need to set them to be single select, so that not having something selected is also not possible. It's quite tricky if you did have, say, just these 3 top values, which are a hierarchy, continent, country, and region. If we only had those in our field parameter, that's great. We can select as many of those as we like because they're related. But the problem is still there that in order to be able to select multiple, we have to have single select turned off, which means that there's always the possibility that a user will unselect all options and get this error message. So not sure how useful it is in a production report. I think it's a nice feature, but I think that it needs to be implemented better to get around this error. So a couple of other things. It does work for calculation groups. I tested out. So here I've got 3 different calculation groups. This one's doing some segmentation of sales, and you can see I can select this, and I can select the different calculation items within the calculation group, and I can switch to a different calculation group and select the calculation items within that calculation group. So that's quite cool. Something I did to have a bit of an experiment and try and push it a bit further. I'll just remove this one here. I created two field parameters, geography 1 and geography 2. And if we have a look at the contents of those field parameters, geography 1 has continent and country. Geography 2 has country and city. And you'll notice that I've connected these two together with just a one-to-one relationship because they're identical, but so that one filters the other. But what I've done is I've made it so that in geography, you have continent is 0, and in geography 2, you have country is 0. So basically, when I filter the first geography continent, it filters to country. And when I filter country in the first slicer, it filters to city. So they're connected, but when I've created the field parameters, I've just changed these numbers so that the filter that I've connected them on filters the different items. What this lets you do is kind of an interesting use case where what I've done is in this slicer, I've put geography 1, and in this slicer, I've put geography 2, and in geography 2, I have enabled it to show the values. But because we have a filter in place, when I select continent, it's actually showing me the country values. And when I select country, it'll actually show me the city values. I've then put geography 2 into this chart here. So the end result is that you kind of have a nice setup where you can switch between two different columns. You can switch between country and continent, but then in your second slicer, you can filter down to be cities within that country, and you can view the cities there. So not sure how useful, but perhaps an interesting use case. There's one other behavior which I think is interesting with this new functionality with field parameters. I'll go back to my original report. So one thing I think is interesting is that if I select multiple items here and I'm filtering my chart, when I choose a new field parameter, those selections are automatically deselected. Why I think this is interesting is that previously, to my knowledge in Power BI, there's never been a way to deselect slicer selections. You know, a kind of general rule of thumb that I've always had is that the only way to clear a slicer selection is with a bookmark or with a user clearing it. There's never been a way to kind of automatically remove a slicer selection, but all of a sudden there is. So with field parameters, you can make selections and selecting something else will automatically clear them. I think it's something worth exploring. I think it's quite interesting that this can be used as a way to clear slicer selection. So it's probably some interesting use cases there. That's it for my demo. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I like the idea that actually, if we use single selection, that probably kind of solves the issue with that errors. I think that's a way to go in production when field parameters are generally available. Of course,
yes.
They're still in preview, but that's an amazing feature.
Hopefully, not too much longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I think that was brilliant as well, Kane. Thank you for sharing that. I think there will be some good use cases in the future. Obviously, no one wants that error screen though in the beginning, but that's good. Now we know how to avoid that. Awesome. Thank you both for your time, and we'll see you at the next Power BI update. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.